for us as a people. Um, I called a brother and we've talked many times since July to now, and the brother's always breaking off some wisdom and knowledge, always giving me some books to read. We're always having some deep discussions, and it's been enlightening. And I just want to give honor to you, Brother Whiting, for being a great mentor and fulfilling your calling here and stepping into your calling. I know you talked about that, and maybe that'll come up today. But I thank God that you answered that call, and because you're freeing the minds of us as African people, and we certainly need that. Also, a side note, so DJ, brother White and DJ on the Daryl Rollins here, he's also an alpha brother of
Hi.
ours. Just wanted to make sure yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Um,
sir.
All right.
yeah. Also, I wanted to share with you guys because we got a lot of Charlotte people on the call. Uh, brother Whiting, your wife's from Charlotte, right?
Yes, she is.
Yeah, went to West Charlotte.
Yeah, West Charlotte.
Yeah. Just wanted to
Yes.
make sure they knew that because I
Connecting the dots. All right.
yeah. So yeah, I know they were just back in Charlotte maybe a few months ago. Um, they had a reunion there, so she was there as well. So yeah, well, without further ado, want to go ahead and hand it over to you, brother Whiting, and let you do your thing.
Well, thank you for that great introduction, Brother Hayes. Um, I feel really honored to be able to speak and dialogue with you this morning. I think it's an excellent choice of days, Sunday, because our ancestors left us with a wealth of information and knowledge that we're still trying to sort through and understand. Um, and one of the reasons that uh, we are still struggling to understand what they were able to accomplish and what they did and how they did it was because they had over 200,000 years to learn from the laws of nature, which is the book. It's the original book for mankind, and it still is, if we pay attention and listen to the lessons of nature. And once they were able to harness that information and knowledge and pass it on for thousands and thousands of years, they were able to create one of the greatest civilizations known to man and the longest lasting civilization. It's no small task to maintain a civilization. I mean, if you look at our situation here in America as an example, uh, depending on what happens November the 5th, it may be the end of this civilization as we know it in America. Okay. So civilizations come and go, and we were able to, because of the knowledge and the unity that came from singing from the same sheet of paper, we were able to hold it together, even though we had struggles at times uh, when we had what we call the intermediary periods. And so again, I'm just so thankful. And I just want to give thanks to that divine intelligence we call God for blessing me um, and for me understanding why I was put here. Okay. The degrees and the jobs and that type of thing, they were only means for me to get to the point where I had the time and could afford to buy the books and travel the world to understand what our ancestors left behind for us. So I feel very blessed, and I'm so thankful that all of you are taking your valuable time to listen to what I have to say. And the last thing I will add to what I just said is be ready for the truth. The truth hurts. I know all of you have heard that. I didn't know what that really meant until later in my life. But the truth hurts because oftentimes it goes against the grain of everything you thought you knew and everything that you believe in. So keep an open mind. And I want to say this before I start with my talk. Brother Hayes will have my email. And if anything that I say or show you, if you do your research and you find that it's incorrect, I would really appreciate it if you would get my email from Brother Hayes and then let me know, because I would thank you, because I'm here speaking truth as our ancestors laid out for us and what I've been able to understand from what they've said and what they've done. Okay? So without any further ado, Brother Hayes, if you can give me I can turn this over so I can,
You need to share your screen.
yes. Let's see here. Okay, here we go. All right.
Also, too, we'll let you, Brother Whiting, let you go for 45 minutes or so, and then we'll have a Q&A. So if you could hold all your questions until the end, we'll let Brother Whiting just go, and please hold your questions.
Okay, it says sharing is not turned on. Okay, let me see. Okay, here we go. I'm still getting a note that it's not turned on.
Okay, try one more time.
Okay. There we go. All right. I would like to also make note that my son has joined us,
Oh,
Robbie O'Neill. All right.
welcome, 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 brother.
And
Welcome.
okay. Can everyone see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Um, okay, first, each one of us has our own individual circle of knowledge based on our parents, our neighborhoods, our relatives, our experiences in interacting with all of the people in our lives, our education, and some of the trials and tribulations that all humans go through in what we call life. And based on all of that, we have a circle of knowledge. So each one of us views the world and each other differently based on that circle of knowledge. And one of the challenges for any ethnic group is to have a circle of knowledge that's consistent and is based on their interaction with nature, which is God's words, and their understanding of their past and their culture. Okay. And that is the challenge, because otherwise you don't have the unity, and the ethnic group doesn't have the ability to take actions without even discussing it with each other. Okay. So if you, and let me give you an example. Oftentimes we have other ethnicities to come to America. And I'm thinking of the Eritreans and Ethiopians, and who started coming to Washington, D.C. And because they have a culture, a history, and a language, and uh, that they all understand and were reared up with, they can come into a city like Washington, D.C. or the suburbs, and all of a sudden you see all these businesses pop up. You see them opening stores and shops. And the African Americans who have been there for hundreds of years are oftentimes standing on the sidelines. And we have our ups and downs. I know when I was coming up in the 60s, in the 70s, we had quite a few black businesses, but somehow that died out. But I want everyone to keep in mind that that circle of knowledge is individual and it's based on, like I said, all of your experiences. So there are things that you may hear that are outside of your circle of knowledge. And what happens oftentimes when we hear things that are outside of our circle of knowledge, we have a tendency to not feel comfortable oftentimes, depending on what it is. Frantz Fanon, who was a great psychiatrist, basically called it cognitive dissonance. And sometimes when we hold a core belief, and I'm going to talk about belief, if we hear information that's different from our core belief, then we have, oftentimes we will reject it, or we will not feel good about the person who's delivering the message. So it can cause oftentimes a feeling of extreme uncomfort. And because the way we are as human beings are structured, oftentimes we will reject anything outside of our circle of knowledge because we have these core beliefs. So I want everyone on this Zoom to, if you feel uncomfortable with some of the things that you see and hear, roll with it. Try not to reject it, but go and do your research. If you hear something, and we'll have some Q&As after maybe an hour, then ask the question, but just don't reject it because it's not within your circle of knowledge. Now, when I was an undergrad, I took some basic psychology courses. And one of the experiments that we were taught was about rats. And that you could put rats in a circle, for example, a defined space, and you start off with maybe 5, and the rats get along very well. But you put maybe 10 to 15 rats in that same space, then conflicts will break out, and oftentimes they'll kill each other. Okay. When we're taught these theorems and these experiments, oftentimes as Black people, we don't get the same lesson that our white classmates get because they don't tell us that we're the rats. It's no coincidence that we're grouped in every city that in America. You have a Black community, and not because Black people just decided that they all want to live together, because we were steered into these communities. And oftentimes they're under-resourced. The opportunities that are available in other communities are not there. So the people who are in charge of policy and the running of countries in the world know that when you have people in a confined space that's crowded with a lack of resources, such as food deserts, lack of safety, that they're going to turn on each other. They already know that. Okay. So this is a part of what we call white supremacy that's not taught. And Dr. Neil A. Fuller, who, by the way, is from Washington, D.C., stated that if you don't understand white supremacy, everything you think you understand will only confuse you. Okay? Again, in psychology, they talk about Pavlov's dogs. You ring a bell and give the dog something he likes, he responds. You keep doing that, over time, all you have to do is ring the bell. The dog is going to respond. It's the same thing with us humans. So when they teach us these concepts, what they don't tell us is that they're being used on us in our communities. Okay. And what white supremacy does is blame us for all the things that are going on. Not saying that we don't have some responsibility, but we're set up. So the odds of us coming out of these type of situations diminish tremendously. So I talked about the crowded and dysfunctional environments. So it's predicted outcomes, friction and conflicts. So it's no accident. It's no accident when you go into impoverished communities where you have a lot of Black folk or any ethnicity, you're going to have friction, a lot more friction and conflicts than you are in other communities. More jails. They already know that a disproportionate enough of us will be going to jail because of the dysfunctionality in our communities and the dysfunctionality in our families and the confusion about us and our identities. So, we have a disproportionate number of our population in jail. So without us really knowing it, we're being controlled, and we don't even have to see the people who are really doing it. It's all set up by design. All right. Another aspect of white supremacy is the mental enslavement. And Wolfgang von Goethe said it best: none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. I had a brilliant economics professor in undergrad, Dr. Betty Collier. I still remember her because she had such an impact on me. She walked in class one day and said, "Did all of you know that you're still slaves?" So we were perplexed. And someone finally asked a question, or stated, "Dr. Collier, I'm not a slave." So she looked at the student and said, "Okay, go and quit your job tomorrow." Okay? So these are the things that are not taught and not discussed. I was fortunate to have some of these brilliant Black professors who basically taught us what we were dealing with. And what that did for me was I made up my mind to get to a point where I didn't have to work as quickly as I could, because I knew that if I had to work, that I was not free. Okay. In fact, she had such an impact on me. I was riding around my little Buick Riviera. Most of you are too young to remember that, but that was sort of like a quasi sports luxury car, you know. And so because of her, she taught us how to go and shop and buy used cars, because she taught us that what is the purpose of a vehicle? To get from point A to point B. So from an economic standpoint, who has the best deal? Somebody who pays $50,000 for one, or someone who can pay $20,000 and get from point A to point B in a reliable and a comfortable manner. So I sold my uh, Buick Riviera and bought a Volkswagen cash. And I rode around in it for about a year until I got to the point where I had to get another. Well, I bought a used car, but at least they had a good heater, because those Volkswagens are noted for not having good heat. Okay. So only in the present can the past be changed and the future predicted. So what has happened to us is that our past has been changed. And as a result of our past being changed and us not knowing who we are in our history, the future can be predicted. Okay. And your reality is whatever you believe. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the truth. If you believe something, it becomes your reality. Okay. So it's no coincidence that when the Europeans started leaving Europe in the early 1440s, the Portuguese were the first ones to go down the west coast of Africa, that wherever they went and when they conquered a people, they imposed their religion on them. You had no choice, because what you believe is your reality. The Arabs did the same thing. The Arabs were enslaving Africans 1,000 years before the Europeans. People don't talk about that. So what happens when your friend, one of your friends or your brothers or sisters or somebody you know uh, becomes a Muslim? They start studying a Muslim book called the Quran. Oftentimes they'll start learning some of the language. Oftentimes they will start dressing like the women, wearing the garb of the Muslims. They will start saying Muslim prayers. So in other words, they become, as best as they can, an Arab. It's the same thing with Christianity. Okay? They imposed Christianity on, the Europeans did, on everyone they conquered, because they knew after 2 or 3 years that they would, in essence, become a European by looking at the world through the same eyes as the Europeans. And so oftentimes we're controlled without people even being around us who control us. And we have to remember, belief has nothing to do with truth. It can be true, but it doesn't have to be true. And I didn't realize this until I was probably in my 40s. I was working for the Internal Revenue Service, and I used to do a lot of traveling, going to various cities throughout the United States. And every time I would travel to a city, I always took it upon myself to find the Black community and maybe go to some of the jazz clubs and see what was happening with Black people in that particular city. On one of those trips, I was in Miami, Florida. And so I found the Black community, and I was sitting in a park. And don't forget, it was a park that was shaped like a rectangle. Sitting on the bench, just cooling out. It was a good day. Sun was shining, not too hot. And I was at an intersection there that ran into the street that was adjacent to the park. And on the corner was a liquor store. Next to that liquor store was a church. Further down the park were some brothers who were slinging drugs. And then it dawned on me, something I had seen all of my life, but I had never been able to connect the dots. There are only three things, basically. And you have offsprings like bail bondsmen, but I'm saying there are three things that are primarily in every Black community, unabated. Liquor stores, churches, and drugs. And I sat there thinking through what had been revealed to me that I had seen all my life, but had just began to think about and understand that why do we have these three things that are in every Black community unabated? In fact, I was in Sarasota, Florida, 4 or 5 months ago. And again, I always seek out the Black community. And within 3 blocks, I saw 6 churches on Martin Luther King Avenue. Okay. So we have to think, what do our oppressors give us that's going to benefit us? If it's something that we can get very easily, and that's in every Black community, we have to think about, is that really benefiting us? Okay. So that leads to religion, and this is any religion. A religion, as Dr. John Henry Clark stated, is the deification of a culture. Okay. Now, what do I mean by that? When a people develop a religion or a belief system based on their own culture and their own interaction with nature and themselves, their gods always look like them. Okay. So you can always tell, anywhere you go in the world, a conquered people, if they worship a God that doesn't look like them. Okay. It's unnatural. All right. And what happens when these conquerors impose their religions on the people they conquer, after 2 or 3 generations, it becomes a reality. All right. So that it becomes such a reality that people will die for those beliefs, because in their heart and their soul, that's what they depend on for their day-to-day survival. So in a way, we can say that belief can be mental enslavement. So the chains and shackles have been taken off of our bodies, but chains and shackles are now around our minds. And this is tough, brothers and sisters. This is a tough one. And let me tell you about one of my personal experiences. When I started really focusing and getting into the studying about our culture and our history, and God instilled in me this insatiable desire. I used to stay up 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. If I went on a business trip, I always had a book or two reading. And I was reading Man, God, and Civilization by John G. Jackson. And I was reading things that were contrary to everything I was taught to believe because I was baptized a Catholic as a child. And I had to deal with the fear that the white Jesus was going to fly out the air and strike me dead because I was reading stuff that was contrary to what I believe, what I was taught to believe. That's that fear. And I had to deal with that to keep reading that book. I don't have to say anymore. Now, I'm not here to persuade you or to try to say you should do or believe whatever you believe. I'm here to tell you the truth as I see it and as it has been unveiled to me, unveiled to me. I'm not trying to change anything that you believe, but I want you to hear the truth. In terms of the Canaan and Palestine, which I could talk a lot about Canaan because Africans conquered Canaan and controlled it for hundreds of years. But this is Dr. Finkelstein. If I came for a Bible in one hand and a rifle in the other, knocked on your door and said, according to my Bible, my family lived in your home 2,000 years ago, would you pack up your bags and leave? That sums up the situation in Canaan. Okay. But the people who are doing it, because of this consolidation and consistency of thought that every one of their children is taught to believe, have garnered and are some of the most powerful people in the world. And so those are facts. That's the reality that we're dealing with. And Malcolm X has said it, and all of you have heard some of his quotes. You can't hate the roots of the tree without ending up hating the tree. You can't hate your origin without ending up hating yourself. You can't hate the land, your motherland, the place that you come from, and we can't hate Africa without ending up hating ourselves. And he said that all of us outside of the Africa, and I found out since I've been traveling to Africa, that they're just as bad as we are in terms of these religions, whether it's Islam or Christianity, is that we are taught to hate ourselves without even knowing it. And that's why it's so insidious. So that puts us into a reality that I equate to the Matrix. Have any of you seen the movie or the series The Matrix? Okay. All right. So we view the world and we think and behave in such a manner that we act against and we behave against our own best interests without knowing it. Okay? So, for example, all of us are taught to think and believe that when we matriculate through the high school and college, grad school, or get our PhD, that we are educated. And what we are not taught is that we are trained to go into a system and perpetuate it and take on the same values of that system, such as materialism. I got to have that sports car. I got to have the big home. I got to have the fancy clothes. And I will often and step on somebody's toes to get it. Okay? I'll stab somebody in the back. I'll lie to get that big house and that car and that prestige. Okay? Because the system is such that oftentimes people are rewarded for those type of behaviors. All right? And because of the way we've come up starting as kids with the images of the white Jesus or the images of Muhammad or the images of Buddha or whatever we're shown, whatever religion that our parents have been exposed to, we have a deep-seated psychological foundation that the God that we worship, that looks like some people on this planet, are more worthy than us. It's inescapable. And all of this is deep-seated, okay? No matter what we say and what we think. And you can see it in our behaviors oftentimes, okay? In fact, I can give you examples when I was an executive and I go to Ritz-Carlton and these fancy dinners and ceremonies. And one time I was some part of the country and I saw another brother. And so I walked over to him to dialogue with him and introduce myself. I introduced myself and we chatted, and he couldn't wait to get away from me, to go and be with some white person. Okay. And he wasn't an executive. Okay. So when we are taught to believe that God is a white man, it had deep-seated psychological damage to us as a people when we look in the mirror and when we look at our families, when we look at our wives, when we look at our children. Because us not knowing our history leads us to believe that the first two people on the planet were Adam and Eve. And I want to talk about how ridiculous that is. It's impossible. And I want to walk you through that. It's impossible for the first two humans on the planet to have been humans classified as white. And that God only talked with Europeans. That Ham and people who look like us are cursed by God. Okay, it's in there. Okay, we choose not to talk about it oftentimes, but it's there. And that we were deemed to be hewers of wood and carriers of water. And the foundation and one of the justifications for slavery is that Jesus never condemned slavery. In fact, he gave rules on how to treat slaves. The entire foundation for our enslavement occurred in the 1400s when the Pope issued a number of papal bulls that said all infidels We basically treated any way that you wanted to treat them. So the entire foundation and the justification for chattel slavery, which was the most barbaric and inhumane treatment of any people on the planet. And one of the tricks that people who are steeped in white supremacy do is say, well, slavery's been around forever. Yes, it has been. But chattel slavery was something entirely different because it reduced Black people to the status of an animal, which means we could be treated the same as an animal. We could be killed, we could be raped, we could be worked, we could be treated in any humane way because we were the same as animals. Nowhere else in the history of man were slaves treated in such a manner. Okay, so that's the trick that's played on us. Oh, well, we had slavery in Europe. Yeah, sure you did. Yes, serfs were slaves, but they weren't reduced to subhumans. So when someone comes up with you for that argument, you can always get them straight. So everything that I've talked about impacts your view of Africa, impacts your view of Africans, impacts your view of Black people, and yourself. In fact, I was quite shocked when I went to Ghana and I was in Accra and I started seeing all these billboards with the white Jesus. They had two versions. They couldn't get it right, so they had two different white Jesuses. But and I guess Black people, once we get steeped in this brainwashing, we don't even think about, wait a minute, if they know what Jesus looked like, why did they have two different images of him? And those two images were different from the ones that we were shown here in America. But anyhow, they were on billboards. They were on the front of businesses. They were on the back of cabs. And then I realized that what had been done to us had been done to Africans also. In fact, they were more deeply ingrained in it. And this was like maybe, what was that, 2019, than we were, because most of the progressive Black churches don't have a white Jesus on the wall anymore. But it's still in our minds, but they don't put it on the wall anymore because we kind of, we are slightly progressive. But in certain parts of Africa, all you see are white Jesus. Okay, so let me get to Africa, and I'm going to touch and elaborate more on some of the topics that I discussed. Um, but I want to talk about Africa to make sure you have a good perspective of Africa. This is the Peters map. This is the map that they don't show you in school. Okay, this is the true size of Africa. Okay, and to illustrate how large Africa is, my wife and I had flown into Kenya because I wanted to go to Kenya because I wanted to walk the ground where the Mama lived and existed, because they were the first Africans to understand that in order to throw off an oppressor, you had to be more violent than your oppressor. Okay. But my point is that we flew into Kenya, stayed there, then we flew down to South Africa to meet it with a tour group. It took us 4.5 hours to fly from Kenya to South Africa. It only takes, what, 4 hours to fly from 4.5 hours to fly from New York to San Francisco. That's how large Africa is. Okay. What they don't tell us is that there are 4.3 billion people in Africa. The average age is around 40. It's a big threat to the world. That's why millions of people are dying in the Sudan right now, and the news doesn't even cover it. Because with the system, worldwide system of white supremacy, the more black folk die, the better. You don't even hear what's going on in Sudan. It's a Holocaust going on as I speak. Okay. So you have about 1.3 billion people in Asia, 1.4. So Africa, in terms of the future, is a big threat in terms of population. So you can fit just about all of Eastern Europe and Africa. The entire United States will fit in the Sahara Desert. Why weren't we taught this in school? Okay. India, China, Japan. Here's the UK down here. Switzerland, the Netherlands, Belgium, all of these countries could fit into Africa. That's how large it is. They don't want us to know that. Okay. Now, I'm going to get to our journey as a people. And this is extremely important. And this is what is not taught. Because Western culture foundation is a pack of lies. They're lies that our children are being taught, that my granddaughter is taught when she's in school, and all of us have been taught. We know conclusively that the first Homo sapiens and Homo sapiens are modern humans who look like us occurred down here in Southern Africa. It's conclusive. Science, paleontology, archaeology, the artifacts that have been found, the drawings that have been left behind, the skeletal remains. We know the 5 stages before we became human. Leakey was the one who opened that door, and since then there have been tremendous amounts of research. And we've done DNA testing for the entire population of the world. The human genome has been mapped. And in all of Africa, the Twa, or the Kusan people, or they call them Bushmen, or the derogatory term is pygmies. That's the same as the N-word. That they are the oldest of all the populations in Africa. They are the oldest. They can go all the way back past 200,000 years. So when I mentioned that Adam and Eve being white was impossible, it is impossible because there were no white people on the planet over 200,000 years ago. Zilch. None. So if we're talking about Adam and Eve had to have been black. It's impossible for them to have been white. And the reason we believe those lies is because we don't know our history. Once we understand and know our history, we will laugh at that notion of that foolishness. Okay? Okay, so what happened? So Africans were on the planet by themselves, and they started leaving around 60,000 years ago. And they started leaving through over here. This is the Booty. It's only about 20 miles to the um, what we now called I call it the Persian Gulf, but what we now call the Middle East. You could walk across here in what we call Israel because there was no Suez Canal. And when I was in Morocco, I could look across and see Spain because it was a clear day. It's only about 20 miles here. So we started leaving Africa, and we were down here in Australia. That's why the original inhabitants of Australia were black. Over here in Asia, you had the black and brown Asians. You still see a lot of them in parts of Asia. Here in China, in Asia. And then we started migrating into what we now call Europe. Okay, now. So the question remains, well, if everybody was, now we got to remember, everybody in Africa is not black. Now, when you're in the Sudan on the equator, in fact, when I was in Nubia and I was attending a wedding there, some of the people were so beautiful, I had to force myself not to stare. They were blacker than 12 midnights, but the skin was flawless. Their eyes were just amazing. The features of their faces. They were some of the most beautiful black people I'd ever seen in my life. But you further you get away from the equator, down here in South Africa, a lot of the Africans are brown. Okay. So all Africans, you have different shades, from brown to dark to black in Africa, depending on how close they are to the equator. So we started leaving, and then whenever we landed, depending on the sunlight, the terrain, and the diet, 10 to 20,000 years after we started leaving Africa, different ethnicities showed up. Aborigines, which are still Africoid, but still they change somewhat. The Asians, the Asians here in China, and now Japan. Now, there was a Chinese scientist who went about the business of trying to prove that the Chinese sprung from a separate branch of the human family tree. He started doing his research. And after 5 years, he had to conclude that the original Asians were Africans. Now, why do they have the folds over their eyes? The folds occurred because that was nature's way of creating natural sunshades. We had to become lighter in Europe because the last glaciation, about 11,000 years ago, it started getting colder and colder and colder. It was slowly being done. It just didn't happen. And so it gave the people thousands of years to adapt. They had to start going into the caves, start wearing clothes, etc. They had to become self-sufficient, and it was scarce resources, and time became critical for their survival. Because if they didn't gather the food to prepare for the harsh winters and store the food in the caves, and since there were scarce resources, they had to be afraid of the strangers. So if any strangers would approach them, they would kill them because they only had enough for their clan or their small group. Okay. So, and remember what I've said about these behaviors, because this will translate into what we see today. In fact, when I was in grad school and we were working on a group project with some banks, and we would have meetings on Saturday at the bank, and say the meeting was at 9 o'clock. Well, I would get there maybe 10 of 9, 5 of 9, and all of my white classmates would be sitting there drinking their coffee and chatting. So this one Saturday, I said, I'm going to fix these suckers. I'm going to get there before them. So I called myself getting there early. I got there about a half an hour before the time we were supposed to meet. Guess what? They were all there. Their perspective on time is different from ours. Because in Africa, time didn't dictate whether or not we survived. We had food, we had, the rivers and the fruits and the vegetables, and we could kill the animals. And that's why women became so prominent in Africa, because women were instrumental in the family surviving with the vegetables and all the things that women do. In Europe, it was a man's world. It was dog eat dog. The women had to stay in the cage. It was a man's world, literally. And so that's why they have a patriarchal societies. That's why African societies are matriarchal. And we see it today. How many of you have had matriarchs in your families? Okay. I had one, and she was tough, but she did an outstanding job. Okay. All right. So, and it's really interesting on this, the matriarchs. My stepfather was a professional boxer. He used to box when he was in the Navy and that type of thing. He was, he was built. He could lift everybody up on in the family. At that time, we had 5 of us on all of his arms. All of us, he could lift us up. Boy, but my mother would back him down. He didn't mess with my mother. She was only about 5'7". I mean, and that's the power. But it was respect. Okay. So this is Djibouti here, and I just want to show you how close Africa is to the Persian Gulf. Okay, so we just crossed. We could see this. We could see Yemen. So we just crossed over in ancient times. Same thing with the Strait of Gibraltar, and of course up in Israel or Canaan, there was no separation. You could just walk across. Okay. Now I talked about the ancient Chinese. These are how some of the ancient populations look. The original Buddhists were black. Of course, all of you know that. They now look more Asian, but initially they were black. And we still have samples of them. Here's the Venus of Willendorf. This is the oldest statue found in Europe, that of a black woman. But even with that, there are some of the white experts that say this is not a black woman. You can't believe your own lying eyes. I talked about the Chinese scientists who basically had to conclude that the ancient Chinese were Africans. Some of them are still there, but you don't see them on CNN or National Geographic. All right. But here are some of them here. So the point I want to get across is that, and this is what again, John Henry Clark, who was one of the greatest historians who ever walked the face of the earth. He said, history is a clock that people use to tell their cultural and political time of day, a compass that people use to find themselves on the map of human geography. History tells the people where they've been, what they've been, where they are, and what they are. History tells the people where they still must go and where they still must be. The relationship of history to a people is the same as the relationship between a mother and her child. And you want to know why they're taking the little history that they were teaching out of the schools? Because of all these reasons, brothers and sisters. The key to our power and our existence on this planet is to know our history and who we are. Because once we do that, we will be singing from the same sheet of music. We won't have to have a meeting to decide that if someone is not treating us right, that we will boycott the store. We won't even have to have a meeting. We will just automatically act in concert if we're on the same page mentally. And so the trick is that that's why they have to keep us, our minds discombobulated and us confused, and to make sure that we never understand what I'm talking about today. Because if we just understood that we were the first humans, if we had been taught that we were the first human, Homo sapiens on the planet, modern humans, then if someone tried to tell us that the first two humans were white people, we would laugh at them. You understand? Am I making sense?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. This is so important. So this is what Adam and Eve probably looked like. These are some of the Kusan people of Southern Africa. Okay. These are the first Eves. Okay. Now, because I'm just going to some of the population. Now, this is another point I want to make. There are certain groups of Africans who can produce white babies. This is a white child. This is not an albino. Now, when this child was born, and they live in England now, but both of them were born in Africa, the husband and wife. It's only occurred with Africans who were born in Africa. And maybe they left, but they were born in Africa. So, of course, he requested a DNA when his baby popped out, test. And the DNA results showed that he is the father and she's the mother. On rare occasion, Africans can produce white babies. We don't understand why. At this point, we don't know how, but it happens. And there's another family. And this child doesn't look as white, but this is his mother and father, his brother and sister, and this is the way he came out. Now, again, I talked about us leaving Africa and populating the rest of the world. So here we have a blue-eyed brown man that was found. He lived about 7,000 years ago. Okay. I know I got to speed up here now because I really took a lot of time because I really want to try to make sure that you understand how important history is, but how ridiculous it is to even come up with the proposition that somehow Black folk are less than any other ethnic group on the planet. Let me ask all of you a question. Have you ever seen a copy better than the original?
No, sir.
Yeah, it's not possible.
Right. Absolutely. So we're the first humans. White folk mutated from us. Asians mutated from us. Every other ethnic group. In fact, another thing, how they keep us fooled, there's no such thing as a white race scientifically, a Black race, an Asian race, okay, an Indian race. There's only one race, the human race. This race thing came about in the 40s. It's man-made. It's made up. Has nothing to do with reality. Has nothing to do with science. But it works brilliantly to keep us separated and to keep us under control. In America, I refuse to, if I have to fill out a form, if it says race, I scratch it out and say human. That's the trick that they play on us. Okay. Now, I want to mention this because I think it's so important in what we're seeing today in terms of this need to kill and take other people's stuff and impose your will on other people. It's done because of fear, folks. It's fear. It's fear because white folk are a minority on the planet. Humans classified as white are a minority on the planet. They only know more than maybe 13 or 14% of all humans on the planet. Nobody teaches us that. So, and they got a problem. Their numbers are dropping. As we advance and women want careers and get more education, they delay having children. Okay? So the white population in America is not replenishing itself. Have you seen that on the news? Have you seen that on MSNBC, CNN, or any of the so-called liberal news stations even? No. So they got a problem. So that's why this whole thing about immigration. That's why this whole thing about not teaching us history, not teaching our history is coming into play. Now, we have a pineal gland, which is basically our spiritual center, which is it's like a walnut in the center of our heads. In India and some of the Asian countries, you'll see the women walking around with a dot, or some of the men, okay, with a dot in the middle of their forehead, a red dot. Okay, that's our spiritual center. About 69% of humans classified as white by the time they're age 40 have calcified pineal glands. In other words, it's not working. Only 5% of Africans are Black people. Now, what does that spiritual center do? Is it a coincidence that no matter what's done to us, no matter what obstacles that we face, we still don't wind up hating people? For example, of all of the atrocities that have been done to us by humans classified as white, and they're still being done to us, we don't hate them. Okay? Why is that? It's this inherent spirituality that is part of our DNA. And that's why even when we take on a religion like Christianity and Islam, we are the real Christians in America. We're the ones who live by, or try to live by the book. We're the ones who keep coming back and saving America from itself. And that's what we're trying to do this go around, because if Trump is reelected, it's the end of democracy in America. And I've traveled to countries where you have authoritarianism and dictatorships. And it's a living hell for most people. And it will be a living hell for most of the white people who vote for him, but they just don't know that. Okay? Because they're not taught, what really happened in Germany, what happened in Italy, how did Hungary become a authoritarian state. It's what we're not taught is that Germany was a democracy. Spain was a democracy. But you can have someone to rise who has certain characteristics that it's like a cult following, like Trump. No matter what he does, no matter what he says, they're going to vote for him. I was at the polls the other day and I was really concerned because I was there for 3 hours poll watching and I only saw 8 Black people. The lines were out the door with white people. So I'm thinking to myself, are they going to do a President Obama on us? Are they going to come out full force and catch us short-footed, where some of our young folk or some of our misguided and confused Black men are saying they can't vote for Kamala Harris and don't understand this is not about Kamala Harris. This is about democracy or fascism / authoritarianism. Those are the only two choices. Okay? I don't care what you think about women, or you have a problem with women being in control, or you have a problem with what she says or what her stance is on Palestine or whatever. The only two choices: democracy or authoritarianism, fascism. But the news media, the mainstream press, they're starting now to talk about fascism. They're just starting. Okay? These are our two choices. So if you got that brother, that crazy brother or crazy uncle or cousin who's talking about Trump, please let them know we only have two choices. Okay. But again, so from our makeup, we're different in terms of our spirituality from most white people. Okay. There are good white people out here. I mean, come on. So, but I'm talking about that 45 to 50% who are going to vote for Trump. It doesn't matter because they are afraid that they will become extinct. And guess what? They have a right to be. Because if we had true fairness and equality, people that are classified as white would eventually become, so there wouldn't be that many of them. Okay? All right, let's keep going. Okay, this is another trick that they play on us. They only teach us about the Ma'afa or our Holocaust and very little about Africa. In fact, they're still denying that Kemet was a Black civilization, even today. The Arabs who are invaders who invaded Kemet around in the 600s AD were so upset by Cleopatra being portrayed as a Black woman that they refused to let the movie be seen in Egypt, and they're going to make another version of their own. But guess what? They never had a problem when Cleopatra was portrayed as white. They didn't have a problem with that. Okay. Now these are invaders, and so they're right now, as I speak, trying to say that ancient Kemet was their ancestors. It's crazy. Okay. Now, in terms of, I just want to make this point too. Let's say that our history is equivalent to a 1,000-page book. When we only focus on Al Ma'afa, it's the same as reading the last 2 pages of a 1,000-page book. The other 998 pages, you know very little or nothing about. And so, brothers and sisters, it's amazing that we've gotten this far. It's amazing. We've been handicapped. Okay. Our minds have been discombobulated, and we are trying, and despite that, we're still here and we're still standing strong. Okay, let's go to the Greeks because I'm a Black Greek, quote unquote. Okay. And just about every theory in terms of mathematics, um, science breakthroughs are attributed to the Greeks. So let's go through some of what the Greeks said. Okay. So Aristotle says that Egypt was the original land of wisdom. They're the oldest nation, one of the oldest nations in the world. They have always had laws and a political system. He's talking about Africans. Okay? Plato, that Africans invented numbers and arithmetic, and most important of all, letters, writing. This is what the Greeks said. Yet, because of our miseducation, when we just started to form our fraternities and sororities, the only model we had was what we were taught. So that's why we are Black Greeks. And unfortunately, brothers and sisters, by us calling ourselves Black Greeks, we are in a way glamorizing and promoting white supremacy. I know some of you are saying, oh boy, yeah, my brother's going crazy now. But think about it. Think about it. You know, why couldn't we be chematicians? Okay. Why shouldn't our alphabet be the Meta Nature, the oldest language in the world? We have the letters, we have the symbols. Okay. So all of us are suffering from this programming that we've gotten through our education and through the images that we've seen. All of us. Okay. Plato. He said, this is what the Africans said about the Greeks. You Greeks are always children. In other words, they say you have no history. So you're like children. Thales, the first so-called Greek philosopher, went to Africa for his education. The first Greek philosopher. They admit that he was the first one. And guess what? He encouraged his students to go to Africa for their education. He spent 22 years and never took claim for the properties of the right triangle, which is it's nonsense. Okay. And this is what some of the priests, the African priests said. Oh, Salome, 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 you Greeks are ever children. There isn't an old man among you. On hearing this, Salome said, what? What do you mean? You are young, the old priest replied, young in soul, every one of you. Your souls are devoid of beliefs about antiquity, handed down by ancient tradition. Your souls lack any learning made horny by time. These are direct quotes that the Greeks themselves said. It's in their writings. Of course, if you're studying a course in Greek, they're not going to read you this here. They're not going to direct you to this part of the book. Okay. Okay, let's move on. I got to move on here. The oldest mathematical tool in the world is the Shango bone. It's over 20,000 years old. It's the oldest evidence of mathematical computation. All right. And I traveled to Belgium just to see this. We were in England, and so I decided to go to Brussels, go to the Royal Belgium Museum. And to my surprise, I was at the Royal Belgium Institute of Natural Science, and the major exhibit was the Shango bone, folks, at the Museum of Science. They say it was the most important find in the history of man. Okay. All right. I'm sorry, I've gotten ahead of myself. This is not what let me see this. Yes, it is. I was thinking of another one. I left the other one out. Okay, yeah, this is it. Okay. Now, what do we have on here? Multiplication, division by 2, creation of prime numbers. Okay. A system of 10. All of these advanced mathematical principles are inherent in this Shango bone. Here it is right here. There's yours truly. This was the major exhibit at their science museum. Okay. Are they teaching your children that in school? Did they teach you that in school or in college? And here's another photo of it that I took. Okay. So anyhow, it has multiplication, division by 2. Okay. Um, Doubling and prime numbers. It includes prime numbers from 11, 13, and 19. And a prime number, of course, is a number that can be divided by 1 in itself. And that's one of the reasons, brothers and sisters, when I was in grad school and I was in the finance and investment program, I was the only one. Oh yes, now I take that back. I was there for 5. I think I saw an African or two and a young lady from Chicago. I still remember them. Why? We're scared of math. We were the originators of mathematics, but they've made us afraid of mathematics. Okay. All right. So, you can look this up yourself. So we know that, again, I talked about the prime numbers. And so that a base of 10, which is our decimal system. Now, this is what one of the brilliant Frenchmen said when he went to Kemet. There are people now forgotten who discovered, while others were yet barbarians, the elements of the arts and sciences. A race of men now rejected from society for their sable skin and frizzed hair. Founded on a study of the laws of nature, those silver and religious systems which still govern the universe. Okay? And this is Gerald Massey. And I'm going to tell you, Gerald Massey was a genius. He was from England. He was a genius. And he wrote a number of volumes, but his crowning achievement is Egypt, Light of the World. It's in 2 volumes. It took me a year to get through the first volume. I wouldn't recommend it for anybody who's really not serious about studying. But what an eye opener. It opened me up to certain things that have carried over to today. And I'm not going to read this. You can see it yourself. But basically what he's saying, that it all started in the old dark land, and that Egypt gave the world the torch. Kemet was the foundation for the civilization of the rest of the world. And not only that, brothers and sisters, you can read it nightly in the heavens. They took the stars and the constellations and the configurations, and they wrote their story in the skies. So it will be there forever if we understood the language and understood what they left behind for us. It can't be denied. Our story is in the heavens. Okay? Now that's a weak lecture by itself. Okay. And I just want to talk about, Kemet and the rest of Africa. At times, in Nubia and Ethiopia were all part of Kemet. All right, it's the same with the Greco-Roman civilization. Okay, so we had 4 golden ages, and I just want to make some points here. The first golden age started by Norma. It lasted for 500 years of prosperity, of living together in harmony. And then human tendencies crept in. The priests became greedy. People became materialistic. All of the things that are part of what we call Western civilization occurred. The civilization went into decline after 500 years of prosperity during the first dynasty. It took them over almost 150 years to correct it. 150 years once it went into decline. because of greed, selfishness, all of the things that we deal with today. Okay. Then you had the second invasion. We were invaded by the Hyksos, who were the Asiatics or probably close to Semites. And they ruled for about 200 years. And so that's where a lot of the stuff that we got came from. Okay. So we had these down periods, but the bottom line is that this civilization lasted for 3,000 years. All right. Let me move on here. I talked about the Greeks. I've already mentioned to them. Let me keep going here. This is what Herodotus, the father of European history, said. He was up here on the Black Sea, over here near Russia and Turkey are and Ukraine. And this is what he saw, the Koshians. He said the Koshians are black with woolly hair like the Egyptians and the Ethiopians. So here we are. He's all the way up here where we have Ukraine and Russia and Poland, those places. And he saw these black folk up here. This is from the father of European history. Okay. I've talked about Kemet and how it was just one, it was more than just Egypt. It was Nubia, Ethiopia, all the way down, and the culture came from the south. Okay. Everything in Kemet came from the south. That's why they looked to the south. That's why their orientation was a southern orientation. In other words, up was south and down was north. And it makes sense when you look at how they migrated up the Nile. Okay. I'm going to show you some of the reliefs here to show you who these people are. All right. Here's some of the Nubian warriors. Okay, now pyramids. Man, we got more pyramids in Nubia than we have in Egypt. So for somebody to talk about the people from outer space, I know you got this young brother now here talking about some, what do you call them, the Argonauts or something like that. He's got a lot of play. He's a brother who's in trying to say that that these stories in the Bible, some of them are true, and he's trying to mix all this stuff together. I see his face, but I can.
Is it Billy
Carson.
something, right? Billy Carson.
Billy
Yeah.
Carson. I
Yes,
think.
Billy
yes,
Carson. That's
yes,
right.
yes,
That's
yes. I'm telling you, it's very convincing, but I'm telling you, be careful, brothers and sisters. Be very careful, because what he's basically trying to say that we didn't do this. That some people from someplace else did it and taught us this stuff. It's just another version of white supremacy. I don't know if he knows it or if he's a tool or maybe he believes what he's talking. Okay? But be very careful about that stuff. This came from your ancestors. Here they are right here. They were practicing. We got the pyramids that fell. It took them thousands and thousands of years to work out the angles and all of this stuff. So if somebody gave it to us, why are they in more in Nubia than they are in Egypt? And how did they make all these mistakes? If somebody gave it to them, we would have been building pyramids perfectly. It's nonsense. So be very careful about these people. They're I don't know whether he's aware or not, but he is promoting white supremacy. Now, here we got some of the ruins in Khartoum. Okay, these look familiar, right? Here we are in Khartoum, the Nubian ruins. There was no Europe, there was no Greece, there was no Rome. And what are our children taught to call this? And what are we taught to call this? Greco-Roman architecture, right? It's a lie. It's African architecture. The Greeks came into Africa and copied African architecture. And then the Western historians renamed it Greco-Roman architecture. All right. And I got to say one more thing about this. This is basically supposed to be a bundle of papyrus reeds. Okay, that's what it was based on. This concept was based on. That's what the Africans were replicating here. They don't even grow papyrus in Greece. It doesn't even grow there. So how in the hell, excuse my French, could it have come from there? This is the lies and the ridiculous stuff that we are taught and that mess up our minds. Okay. So here we have Joseph. I wanted to show you him because they're still denying that these are Africans. Okay. Now here's this African here, and they're saying he's not African. Here's Imhotep, the first multi-genius in the world. Okay, I'm going to talk more about him. I just want to show you some of these figures. Oh, by the way, Imhotep was the first physician in the world. And the Europeans recognize it. Your doctors today, do we have any physicians in the audience? Well, that's okay. All of you are on mute. But if you are a physician, you had to take the so-called Hippocratic Oath. And you give all praises to Asclepius, who is basically Imhotep. Okay. So the first physician in the world was an African. The first female physician, Pesachet, was an African. The first female physician in the world was an African woman. And she was over all of the training all of the female physicians. Here she is right here. We got it in writing, written in stone. It can't be denied. Okay. All right. Here we had the step pyramid of Saqqara. I wanted to take this. When I was in Kemet, this was one of the white people who was on the tour. This guy knew more about history. I swear, this was a brilliant white boy. I mean, oh, he knew our history. Okay. Anyhow, this interest is in when you look at the calculations, it's 5. All right. This is the first stone complex in the world. Okay. Listen to me. The first stone complex in the world. All right. Nowhere else on the planet had anyone constructed a complex out of stone. Africans were the first people to do that. It looked just as modern as something that you would build today. Now, when you walk through this entrance, what do you see? There was no Greece. There was no Rome, but they called this Greco-Roman architecture. And these are the bales of papyrus reed. That's why they did this. Our children, and we were taught lies. We were taught lies, folks, to elevate them at the expense of us looking down on ourselves. They stole just about everything from us. And as I go along, you will see that. So here we go. Let me go back here again so you can believe your own lying eyes. Here it is in Africa before there was a Greece and Rome, thousands and thousands of years. And now today it's called Greco-Roman architecture. And in every municipal center in your city, you're going to see architecture, African architecture. In fact, when I was in DC, I used to take the kids around and I'll say, I want you all to show me the African architecture. And they would say, oh, Mr. Whiting, there's African architecture. Okay. But this has a profound impact on us when we're taught these lies. Okay, I'm gonna keep going here. Here we inside the step pyramid of Saqqara, but I wanted to here's the step pyramid of Saqqara. Now under this, and I was able to go into some of the rooms, 90 feet under this are 100 rooms. Okay. With there I am with the Arab. I was about 2 or 3 inches taller than I am today. You know, as you get older, you start shrinking. So here's some of the meta nature written on the walls. Now, What does this meta nature say? It tells a story, the first story in the world, folks, the first story in the world of life after death, of resurrection, of a virgin who had a virgin birth, who was impregnated by the Spirit of God, who had a holy child, Haru. The first time in the history of man in Africa, 2,700 years, 3,000 years before Christianity. The entire foundation for Christianity is written on these walls, folks, in stone. Okay. So the first Bible in the world was the pyramid text or the books of the coming forth by day, which they called, or the books of life, but they called it the book of the dead. Because another trick they play on us, every time they invade a country and take it over, they change the name on our stuff. So when you think about the book of the dead, they're like, oh, the book of the dead. Oh, I want to read that. They change the names to confuse you. It takes away the intent of what the Africans had in mind. Now, let me read you a passage from this holy book, and you will see where the language and the type of phraseology they use in the Bible that they wrote came from. God is one and only, and none other existed with him. God is the one who hath made all things. God is a spirit, a hidden spirit, the spirit of spirits, the great spirit of the commissions, the divine spirit. God is from the beginning, and he hath been from the beginning. He has existed from of old and was when nothing else had being. He existed when nothing else existed, and when existed, he created after he had come into being. He is the Father of beginnings. God is the eternal one. He is the Father of beginning. God is the eternal one. He is eternal and infinite, and endureth forever and aye. Sound like some language from the King James Version, doesn't it? I endureth existence. And I could read, oh God, if you were to read the pyramid text, you would think the phraseology is just like come out of the King James Version of the Bible. So we know where they stole that stuff from, folks. It can't be denied. Now I know now some of you may be experiencing some cognitive dissonance right now. Okay. And I understand that. Okay. But roll with it. Okay. Roll with those feelings. Don't get scared. Don't let it scare you to say, I don't want to hear anymore. All right. So, and the fact that they say, oh, the first people who monotheism were the European Jews. Come on. These are your ancestors. God is one and only. Yes, they had all these other deities, but they were like our angels. The whole concept of angels is like these deities that they had because they were an aspect of nature, which is God's word. Okay. Oh, let me tell you what the Society of Biblical Literature says. Here it is, writings from the ancient world. The ancient Egyptian pyramid text, second edition. This is the Society of Biblical Literature, folks. They know it. They know where all that stuff comes from. All right. I could show you, oh my God, so many images of stuff that they've stolen from us. All right. Roll with that cognitive dissonance. Okay, so I talked about mathematics. We got the papyrus. The papyrus talking about addition, subtraction, algebra. Okay, we have the papyrus with the exams for the students of algebraic expressions. Okay, geometry, trigonometry, and beginning calculus. They were finding the space under a curve, which is beginning calculus. Our ancestors, Africans, before Europeans were even civilized, before Greece and before Rome, while they were still barbarian with the Vandals and the Vikings, before they even came into existence, our ancestors were mathematicians, had already figured out geometry and trigonometry as a result of studying nature and observing nature. Prime numbers. Okay. So we got some more. I mean, we got the proof. Let me go through this. We got the medical papyrus. Okay. It's the oldest known medical papyrus in the world. And our math problems also included the so-called Pythagorean theorem. All right. All right, here we go. I talked about algebra. So they could solve second order algebraic quadratic equations. All right. The so-called Pythagorean theorem, folks, is embedded in the second pyramid in the Giza Plateau. Khufu's son pyramid has the properties of the right triangle. Okay, so and Pythagoras never claimed that he discovered it. We just assigned that to him. It's a lie. This was African mathematics. Our alphabet, folk, the foundation for it was the Medu Neter. Okay? Here we have some samples here. Hieroglyphic, they call it hieroglyphic. And they trace it, Proto-Semitic, Phoenicians. The Phoenicians had an impact on the Hebrew, the Greek, early Greek, Latin, modern Hebrew. Okay, Roman. So we can trace, we could spend hours on this. We can trace English all the way back to the Medu Neter. When you look at all of these scripts, Africans were the first people to develop a script. The Fibonacci series, okay, which leads to 1.618, which is called God's number. No building that you are sitting in right now, or has been built and is still standing, it cannot be built and stand without incorporating 1.618. This was included this is in the Great Pyramid. The Great Pyramid includes 1.618. 5. All right. Here it is right here. The golden number. Okay, when you calculate the numbers, it's 1.619. Other people weren't even civilized. They were still barbarians. And our ancestors were doing this. They want us to know this. Our children must know this. Future generations must know this. If there's any hope for us rising to the greatness that we once had. Every building, no matter what shape. And not only the buildings, it doesn't matter. It has to incorporate this ratio. That's why it's called God's number. Shells, everything in nature. Sunflower seeds. All of them had that 1.619. And the Africans had discovered that and were using it. The galaxy. Your face. Butterfly. Your arm. 1.619. Your ear. That's why the Mona Lisa is so beautiful. 1.619. Okay? All right. It's incorporated in these doorways. That's why if any of you brothers are in some of the secret societies, you know a lot about this stuff, some of these angles, but you're probably taught that you weren't taught that it came from Africans. Okay. See, this is another way they control us. They create these organizations, and we join them, and they teach us something and tell us, oh yeah, you're special because you know the secrets. Okay. But I have to ask the question, brothers. If so many of us know the secrets, why are we still at the bottom? Okay, I talked about the Greek scholars using drawing up. So let me go here. The number nine, Africans understood. In fact, a lot of the spirituality in terms of their creation story has nine deities. Okay, so they just didn't pick that number for just out of random. Nine denotes completion, wisdom, compassion, etc. Let me run through this real quick. You can take nine, it's a very unique number. And when you go down the list, when you take nine and you just keep doubling it, the quotient will always be nine, no matter what, you keep doubling it. Okay. You add all of these, you add these numbers, it comes to 27. You break 27 down, it's nine. You add these three numbers, you come to 36. 3 plus 6 equals 9. There's special qualities, spiritual qualities to the number 9. That's why the Africans creation story has 9 deities. Which the Europeans copied and basically came up with the Genesis story. All right. So Buddha was supposed to have 9 virtues. The Bible, there are 9 fruits of the Spirit. Jesus died at the 9th hour. The number 9 is Brahma, the creator. Ramadan, the ninth month of the year. This is not by chance, folks. Okay. The Baha'is have a 9-pointed star. 9 months for a woman to have a baby. All of this stuff is synced. There's a reason for this. 9 innings in a baseball game. Now, I know I'm stretching it, but is that a coincidence? I don't know. Okay, so I've talked about Kemet and been called the father of history, the mother of civilization. All right, let's keep going. So the first stellar calendar was developed by Africans. And why? Africa, especially in Kemet and Nubia and those places in the desert, is one of the few places in the world where it only rains 4 or 5 days, 4 or 5 inches a year. So they had clear skies day and night. So you had stargazers. Their profession was to watch and observe the heavenly bodies, and they mapped and they saw these connections, and they understood that that was part of their spirituality. That was them, because we come from that star stuff. Okay. All right. So we were using the stellar calendar about 10,000 years BCE, before the Common Era. I'm gonna run through some of this because this can get very technical and it can get very complex. I'm trying to keep it simple here. All right. And so the Africans on the Nile had to know when the Nile was going to overflow. It was critical because they had to prepare. So when they saw the heliacal rising of Sirius, that's when the sun and Sirius came up in the morning around the same time, they knew that 2 or 3 weeks later, the Nile was going to overflow. So they had to prepare the land, they had to prepare the farmers, get people out of the way so they wouldn't drown, and that they would have a flood for about 3 months. During that 3 months, they would have public work projects going on. There's nowhere in Kemet, no evidence whatsoever, except in a book that some Europeans wrote of the Africans on the Nile enslaving people to build pyramids. In fact, it is totally ridiculous because the Great Pyramid was built around 2800 BCE. Abraham hadn't even been born. So how in the heck are the Jews going to be enslaved and building pyramids when they weren't even around? They didn't even exist. See, they can trick us because they don't teach us our history, folk. And I hope that if the one major thing you're picking up, how important it is for you and your children to know your history, because it keeps you from being hoodwinked and bamboozled, as Malcolm X used to say. They know that. That's why they don't want us to know it, because we will be able to decipher when they're lying and when they're not lying. Okay, we keep going. And so they noticed this cycle, and they noticed that this hierarchical rising, every 4 years, it would fall back a day. So they figured out, so they had the silver calendar and the other calendars, which was, they had a 365 a day calendar, which was a silver calendar. They had 360 days, and they had five festival days at the end of the year, 365. That 365-day calendar, the lunar calendar, the solar calendar, and the sidereal calendar, which is basically the stars, would all reconcile and start back at the beginning every 1,460 years. Okay? If you divide 4 into 1,460, you get 365. So it naturally, by nature, it reconciled. The calendars we have now, the Gregorian calendar, it's all messed up. It doesn't adhere to nature. Okay? That's why we have to insert the leap year, because we made this stuff up. It's out of sync with nature. The African calendar was in sync with the natural order of the universe. So they didn't have to do anything. It just automatically. But their time frame, think about this, 1,460 years. 1,460 years. Can you think about their perspective on time? We are rushing, and worrying about next week. They had a calendar that reconciled every 1,460 years, naturally. The solar calendar. So Africans were the first humans in the world to utilize and discover the solar calendar that we use today and the rest of the world use today. Why aren't they teaching that in the schools, brothers and sisters? Why don't our children know this? This is so important. It changes their view of the world. It changes their view of Africa. It changes their view of themselves. And we can date it back to 4,240 BCE. In fact, let me see if I got, and so I'm gonna go ahead. They had 12 months of 30 days each, a 10-day a week. Why did they have 10 days? They didn't make it up, because every 10 days, a new crop of stars would rise over the horizon. So they had a 9-day work and 1 day off. So it was a 10-day week. But it was in sync with what they observed from nature. They didn't make it up. Our week is made up. 7 days had nothing to do with nature. The months that we have nothing to do with nature. Yeah, we have winter, summer, and fall. They coincide with that because we kind of, gerrymandered, we rigged the calendar, but that's basically it. But the African calendars were in tune with the universe. So, like I said, they had 360 days, 5-day festival in a year, 146 solar years, or 4 periods of 365 years. So 1,461 Egyptian years had passed. All right. So, and it coincided precisely with the solar year, only once every 1,460 years. So they integrated all of these calendars into one and made it work for them. And here's the Kemetic calendar here on the wall. You can see it for yourself. And the thing about our ancestors, they must have known maybe the Martha was going to happen, or maybe somebody had a vision or something. They wrote this stuff in stone. Okay. And so here's a calendar. It's very logical. You have the first day of the first month, the second day, You keep going up until you get to the 9th day, and they have a glyph for 9. Then you have one for 10, and then you go down to the second week, and it's the same thing in the third week. Very logical, very practical. Okay. In fact, year before last, here in Palm Coast, Florida, and I had the spirit hit me in February of one year, and I decided that we were going to celebrate the African New Year. Okay, on June the 21st, which is the summer solstice. And in ancient times, that's when this occurred, but thousands of years have passed. So of course now it depends on where you are on the planet, and your longitude. And so we did. In 2023, we celebrated the African New Year. We had a big celebration. We watched the sun come up over the horizon on the beach. Then we had a celebration at our African American Cultural Society. And so and this is why our history is so important. We were the first people in the world to discover the solar calendar, and we the first people to use the new year. The first people on the planet, thousands of years before anybody else. And here's some of my committee. We were on the beach. Even the mayor of our city showed up. I mean, we had the politicians there. They didn't run away from this. And to this day, I haven't had anyone to challenge me. None of the academics, nobody. Okay. And we had and I have to tell you this, what time is it? Brother Hayes, let me know when you want to stop, because God, I didn't realize it's 12 o'clock. I can't believe this. I mean, it's like,
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that, brother. Hey, you excited? It's good information. We're benefiting from it. So, I'll take a quick poll here to see. I know we want to get a Q&A in, at least 30 minutes or so, because I know there are some questions with all the information that you shared, but it's an exciting presentation. And so, how's everybody feel about maybe a few more minutes and then we go into Q&A?
Yeah, that's fine.
Good with that?
Yeah, I want to make sure you have something to go through.
okay.
Yeah.
I'll wrap it up with the new year, then we can go into Q&As. Okay.
Yes, sir. All right.
So what happened, brothers? It was a blessed day. This was in 2023, June 21st, the summer solstice. It was raining all over Palm Coast that morning. In fact, when I got up, I started not to go to the beach because we wanted to watch the sunrise. But I said, no, I better go. And so when I got there, the mayor was there, and so were about 20 or 30 other people. And when I got to the beach, it wasn't raining on the beach, but it was thundering and lightning all over the rest of Palm Coast, but not on the beach. We had about an 45 minute to an hour celebration to observe the African New Year and the rising of the sun, and had drummers and and prayers and that type of thing. And then when my wife and I had packed up everything, we were going back to the car, this is what we saw. Okay. Now it's still raining over other parts of the city. In fact, our pastor of our African American Culture Society, he didn't show up because when he woke up, it was raining, so he turned over and went back to sleep. So we had a double rainbow. And then when we got in our cars and started leaving the beach, it started raining. It was a blessed day. Okay, just want to say that. Okay, and so here I am. I followed up with a presentation at the African American Culture Society, and we had drummers, etc. And the Africans call it a Wepet Rinpet. That's what they call New Year. And so we put out a plaque to commemorate this special occasion. And right now we're in the African New Year of 62-64. That was this was in 23. And these are the truths that we need to know, and we need to start embracing our culture and celebrating our New Year. The Chinese had their New Year, the Jews had their New Year. Why can't we have ours based on our culture and history? Okay. So with that, I will be quiet, and I will respond to any questions you may have.
Let me just say, Brother Whitey, that was incredible. That was incredible. And I know you had to kind of rush through some of the last few slides, but we definitely will have you back so we can get some more in-depth information as well. I mean, that was incredible. So I'm sure I speak for all of us when I say we really appreciate you doing this. So yeah, with that, open for Q&A. Brother Whiting, I forgot to tell you. So this is a presentation put on by the Anupasar Jetty Society. We meet every Sunday at 10 to 12, just to discuss African literature. We talk about African spiritual practices. And so it's just a way to free the African mind. So I know we do have some guests on the call here. If you ever want to attend, please feel free to come on out. We would love to have you. So with that being said, I forgot to mention I got my wife on the call here. I know she's gonna have some questions. Jen's on the call. I got my brother on the call here, my biological brother.
I another Hayes.
That's
all right.
Brother Whitey always called me Brother Hayes, but it's Haynes. But hey, I let it slide because that's my big bro. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, but I got my brother, his family, Al Joyce. They're on the call as well, and then we got some guests as well. So hey, feel free, everybody, jump on in and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, cool. I don't know who's gonna start. So I have not done anywhere remotely close to as in-depth of a study as you presented today. I would like to say like I've dabbled with bits and pieces of that information. And as we got closer to the end, it felt like it was getting like more and more and more and more exciting. So I don't know like how many more slides you had, but if you did have like a lot more information that you wanted to present, I would like to know like when is another time that you're doing a presentation? When is another time that you're getting more in depth with that information? Because I was glued, stuck, listening the whole time, personally.
Well, thank you. Well, I can talk with Brother Arnold there, and we can work on a date, because I really think it's my mission, as I indicated earlier. The reason that God put me here was to do this. Yeah, all the other stuff just prepared me and put me in a position where I could do it. Okay. I've done this for 40 years. I've never charged a dime. Some people make their living doing this, and they charge you a lot of money to basically hear some of the stuff that I just told you. But this is my mission. This is my gift back to my people and my community, because I've been so blessed. So whenever we'll talk, and we can set up another a Sunday. That's when you meet, and then we can keep going. But I'm about maybe a little over halfway through. Okay, because there's so much. It's so what I'm doing a computer dump of 40 years of knowledge.
So, Brother Whiting, what we can do, yeah, we'll have a discussion and have you come back and do a part 2 for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, up to this point, I wish I had questions, but I mean, you spoke pure fact, and just in I'm like DJ. I haven't done any deep dive, but
Right.
throughout the years, sporadically, there wasn't any foreign information that you said today. All facts from my perspective. So I wish I had questions for you, but I just want to say I really appreciate your time. I know your time is valuable. And the information that you laid down today is a great foundation, for African minds, man, that that haven't heard this before. That the way you laid it out, you can regurgitate it, you can take it with you. So I really appreciate your time, sir.
Well, thank you.
Good morning or afternoon now. How
Thank
are
you.
you?
I'm great. How you doing?
I'm well.
It's
Nice.
his whole family here. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, that's my beautiful wife right there.
Yes.
So it's nice to see you. I hear you all talk on the phone all the time, so it's nice to put a face with a voice that I hear on the other side of the phone sometimes.
Okay.
I was listening intently to everything that you were saying. I was also born on the 9th, so I'll say that I have a little bit of extra blessings sprinkled in somewhere. And Arnold was born on the 19th. I don't know if you knew that, but we're both January 9th and January 19th. So yeah.
Highly blessed and favored there.
And so as I'm thinking about and kind of reflecting on everything that we discussed, especially thinking about what we discussed at the beginning of the course about and I call it a course because we learned on today. But all of these things are important, and being able to continue to get these learnings and knowing where we come from and believing where we come from and who we come from. But the reality is we have to navigate through this world as it exists today.
Yes.
And so I would ask you, understanding that we have a journey to go through and we are at different places in our journey, how do we take these learnings and apply them to our everyday lives through work and conversations with people that don't look like us and don't have these same beliefs, and they're in a different space, and being able to keep our sanity as we navigate that?
That is a profound question. It really there's so many pieces to the question that you ask. All right, let me start with what I had to do. As most people, once I started reading and becoming woke, I started trying to tell my friends and my relatives. And oftentimes, depending on where they were in terms of their level of consciousness, if I said anything about the origins of Christianity, then some of them were like, it would turn them off.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I learned very quickly that when it comes to religion, and my dad told me this when I was a kid, he said, there are two things you don't discuss, son, with other people who you don't know, religion and politics.
That's right.
Okay. So my experience has been, if you don't know somebody, until you really feel comfortable with someone and see where their head is, um, you can talk about maybe ancient Africa if they're receptive. Oftentimes, our people are not receptive because because they believe and they have been brought up in such a way through the education and the propaganda that African had no impact on the world. It was of no consequence. It's the dark continent. And when you start talking about the greatness of our ancestors and what they were able to accomplish and what they did, which impacts every aspect of our lives, sometimes their eyes will glaze over. Because in order for them to understand that particular ream of thought, they have to have some knowledge of ancient history or knowledge of themselves. And so, and most of our people, and it doesn't matter whether they have a PhD or a master's or undergrad degree or no degree. Okay. Sometimes the people who are more resistant are the ones who have a couple of degrees because they've been hoodwinked into thinking that they're educated. They don't understand that they've been trained, not educated, because true education is knowledge of self. Okay. So that my first uh, response would be, you have to get to know people. And then you have to make a decision if you have children, how will you navigate teaching them the truth? But when they go to school,
Right.
that they have to know that they have to be very careful about challenging the teacher when they know that the teacher is teaching something that's untrue. In fact, I can tell you a story about my youngest son. He was in a private school up in Delaware, Maryland, and he had a Jewish professor, and they got into a discussion about whether or not the African Holocaust was worse than the Jewish Holocaust. And it was all said and done. We got a call that evening that we had to come and pick our son up. When we got up there, they had all of his clothes it packed, and they kicked him out of the school because he held his ground. All right. So now that's an extreme example, but my point is, and so I'm dealing with this right now. One of my granddaughters, she's our son has her in a private school. It's a Christian school. And she's complaining about, Papa, they're teaching me stuff that is not true. She said, for example, just last week, she said, Papa, why does God have to be a man? Okay. All right. So I've had to instruct her in the truth, but at the same time, let her know that if the teacher says something, and if she knows it's not true, just go ahead and give her the answer. And it's really unfortunate that that our kids who are aware and know some of the truth, that we have to put them in that situation. All right. And it just doesn't stop in high school. It goes on to college. If you're taking a philosophy class and they tell you the Greeks did this or math, or they tell you the Greeks in the Pythagorean theorem, what are you going to get up there and say, Professor? Pythagoras couldn't have come up with the properties of the right triangle when it's embedded in the Great Pyramid on the Giza Plateau. Okay, because so you have to. It's a very difficult situation that we put ourselves that we find ourselves in for those of us who are conscious. And so what I try to do with my friends, I'm in a book club, and I've been in this book club now for 8 or 9 years, and we read a lot of the literature. Some of the books behind me we read, but a large numbers of the brothers are still holding on to Christianity. And I understand. So you have to have understanding and empathy when people will hear the truth, but they can't quite accept it. They may not reject it, but they can't quite accept it. Because even despite all of the books we've read, we've read books that show you exactly where all of the errors in the Bible, like The Age of Reason by Thomas Paine, it just tears the Bible to shreds and shows you this is ridiculous because all these stories don't mesh, the time frames are different, the whole 9 yards, but yet they still invoke the name of Jesus. And I got one of my book club members, Matthew Davis, on there right now. That's why he's smiling. He knows what I'm talking about. He knows I have to tip around this stuff. In fact, at our last book club meeting, and we've been together for 9 years, and I love these brothers. I said, we got to cut this Adam and Eve BS out. And so one of the brothers said, "Oh my God." It was like Jesus was going to fly down and strike me dead. And they know better. But so that's how difficult it is. It's extremely difficult. Matt, would you want to chime in and kind of talk about some of this? How difficult it is?
No, Rob, and how we have to navigate that whole situation is oftentimes quite frustrating, but you go slowly to keep from alienating people who you call friends. So that's my take. And when you said that, is when I decided to show my face, Oh gosh, it's true.
Yes. I mean, my sister, I love her dearly, but she is a Christian to the core, so I tread lightly when I'm around her because I know where she's coming from. So, and so that's the difficulty of, it's almost like a curse when you know the truth and you understand what's going on around you, but you have to be careful and pick the people and the times as to who you can share that truth with. That's why this is so difficult. And the people who enslaved us and taught us those beliefs know that. That's why they insisted we had to become Christians or Muslims. It's extremely difficult.
You mentioned something that was good, and that word empathy. And I think in our weekly discussions, we talk a lot about empathy and balancing the spheres. And
Yes.
we're reading the Metaneta, which I'm sure you know, and talking a lot about the laws of Ma'at.
Yes.
So I think understanding better how to live by those laws and balance some of that empathy and understanding. So that we can continue to balance our spheres and chakras, I think is good. So thank you for that.
And I would like to quote some text from the Coming Forward by Day. Who are you to judge? God didn't judge you when you didn't do the things you need to do or didn't speak good speech. So it's not for us to judge. All we can do is try to live our lives, embrace our culture, embrace the truth, and live it ourselves And you're exactly right. If we abide by the principles of my art, you know, and of course, all of you know, if you're talking about the principles of my art, you know where the Ten Commandments came from.
Mm-hmm.
But have you discussed that the Europeans did not put in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not lie? Think about that.
Mm.
They left that one out. So you can be a pathological liar. With, and again, I'm not knocking Christianity, but Christianity has an escape hatch that's as wide as a Mack truck. Because all you can do, well, you first thing, you're born in sin, you're expected to sin, but when you do, as long as you believe in Jesus, you will be forgiven and you will go to heaven. So you can do anything. That's why Trump is where he is. The fundamentalist white Christians say, hey, as long as he believes in Jesus, he's good to go. Yeah, he talks nasty. He denigrates people. He's revengeful. He's an adulterer. He's a thief. He's a convicted felon. It doesn't matter. You're expected to sin. Okay? And that's why I am so concerned about this election. They don't care. And see, again, we have to remember, almost 60% of them have a calcified pineal gland. Africans couldn't do that. I'm talking in general. Yeah, you got bad black people and evil black people like you have in other groups. But I'm saying as a group, African Americans could not accept someone like Trump to be president. We couldn't do it. But they can. So let's hope that doesn't occur, but I don't know.
Powerful. Brother Whiting, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that that there were other ancient civilizations, African civilizations that preceded Kemet. Oh, can you talk a little bit about like some of the other civilizations, like the Kingdom of Kush, and maybe where did the Africans go into Kemet with a lot of this culture? We talked about the pyramids. Did they come in with an understanding of certain spirituality, an understanding of mathematics and science? Did they bring that information with them, or was that fostered and developed in Kemet?
They brought it with them. It as they traveled up the Nile, they accumulated. Now remember, the Nile is over 4,000 miles long. It's the longest river in the world. It took thousands and thousands and thousands of years. They were walking basically, I guess once they planted or used up the area, or the ones who were adventuring, some kept moving. But by the time they got to Nubia or Kush, the entire foundation was already developed. The Meta Nature, I didn't get to showing you that, but the Meta Nature was already formed prior to Kemet coming into existence. Okay, we have before Kemet 12 kingships. Okay, where the Meta Nature was formed, the mathematics, they were starting to experiment with working on pyramids. They finally got it right with the step pyramid of Saqqara. But we have evidence of some falling. They didn't have the angles right. They hadn't worked out the mathematics. So we see this continuum from Southern Africa and this accumulation of knowledge all the way up to Cush, Nubia, Ethiopia, into what we call Egypt or Kemet. So no, it basically, so by the time, but it was the apex of all of that stuff coming together. It came together there in Kemet. And that's why it is so disturbing to me when we got young people like Billy Carson, that's his name, and he has a large following. And and then talking about, and I guess I can say this to a lot of you because you already know it. If you put that King James Version of the Bible in the drawer, there's no evidence whatsoever of any of those characters existing. None. Think about this, brothers and sisters. We can go back millions of years to Lucy. We can go back to the first Homo sapiens in Southern Africa, the Twa. We can find the DNA. We can find skeletal remains. We can find artifacts. We can find drawings. Now think about this. There's not one skeletal remains of any of those characters that are mentioned in the Bible. None. Mark, Luke, Matthew, John, go on and on and on. None. Why? Doesn't that seem to be strange? And that was only 2,000 years ago. We can find Imhotep. We know how he looked. We know what he did. Okay. Peshishet, the first female physician, we know what she did. We know what she looks like. But yet, no evidence outside of the Bible of any of those characters. None. Okay. So, and don't even talk about when you trace the lineage of all of those characters and you come up with the world began 6,400, some of y'all 6,000, I'm sorry, 4,000, they got it down, 4,300 BCE, somewhere around there, 4,400 BCE, between 4,300 and 4,600 BCE. It is nonsense. You mean the Big Bang, we know it's billions of years, we got billions of galaxies, billions of planets. And through science, they've gone back billions of years when the Big Bang occurred. And you're going to tell me that it only happened 4,400 years ago? It's nonsense. Okay?
Right.
So, but again, that's also another indication that they don't even teach us science properly. Okay. So I always say that, in fact, when I was in Spain, I spent a month in Spain doing research on the Moors, but I went to some of the cathedrals, and at the feet of Mark, Luke, Matthew, and John was the age of Taurus. You had Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. Had zodiac signs at each one of those prophets' feet. They are called the pillars. Why? Because they represent the cardinal points of the zodiac, of the age of Taurus. That's why you see all of the bull symbolism in the Bible. Then when we switched to the age of Pisces, then we started seeing the fish symbolism. Jesus with the fish, Jonah and the whale. Jesus took 5 fish and got so many loaves of bread and fed thousands of people. Okay. Then they teach us that things can happen that is impossible for nature to produce, like walk in the water. Instead of telling us that if you go out in the evening or in the morning and you go in a body of water, and when the sun rises, you'll see the sun walk in the water. That's the only way the sun can walk the water. I mean, come on. You know, we are taught this stuff and we're taught to believe it. So no matter how intelligent we are, no matter how educated we are, we just roll with with it, even though it doesn't even make sense.
Oh, you got any more questions out there? I got one quick one. So,
Okay.
all right. What do you say to skeptics that say, like, for instance, I've traced my family back, like a lot of us, we do our DNA testing, we can trace our families back, our ancestors back to Central West Africa,
Right.
right? What do you say to skeptics that say, well, that has no connection to ancient Kemet? Ancient Kemet, North Africa, and maybe they migrated from South Africa, but the West Africans, that's a different group of people who have no real connection to that, and they don't have any DNA ties to that. What do you say to skeptics that say that?
Brother, total nonsense. See, this is what I'm saying. People don't know history. When the invasion started happening, starting with the Hyksos, Africans started leaving Kemet and going to West Africa. Okay, you had the Dogon, who knew that there was a Sirius B. We didn't confirm it until 1945. And the European scientists are just baffled. How could they have known that? They're not supposed to know that because you can't see it, but the naked eye. When I was in Ghana, so many of my friends, I was astonished myself. Oh, my lineage is Kemet. They left when the invasion started happening with the Indo-Europeans and the Semites, and they started leaving because of the turmoil, and they went to West Africa. So there's a direct connection. And then from Southern Africa, there's a direct connection because those are the people who brought the knowledge up the Nile. And then you got in the Congo, you have remnants of the culture. They just don't know the history. So when they say that, let them know that when the invasion started in Kemet, that a number of the commissions left. They left and basically went to the west coast of Africa. And we got to remember, during ancient times, there were parts of the Sahara Desert. It wasn't like it is now. Okay, so that's the answer to that. But if you go to Ghana and you go to countries in West Africa, you will be amazed that of so many Africans saying that their ancestry was in Kemet. Okay.
Powerful. Thank you. Thank you.
In fact, the Dinka symbol was found. Tony Brown is doing some digs over there, and in one of the burial sites, he saw an Dinka symbol in Kemet. So that's where it came from. Okay. Wow. Yes.
That's
in Senegal. Excuse me for cutting you off. I just don't want to lose my train of thought. Dr. Cheikh Diop traced the basic language of Senegal back to Kemet. The common words and phrases.
That did bring up one quick question I wanted to ask. Is there any connection? Because I know sometimes they'll say, like in the ancient Americas with the Aztecs and everything, that they'll find remnants of Kemetic culture there as well. So from the research, is there any? Have you found that same connection? And can you kind of walk us through that?
Absolutely. Oh my God. Oh man. I'm just going to do a brief thing on the pyramids here in the Americas. They're on the same north-south axis. And when you look at the first civilization in Americas, the Olmec, I'm sure that you've seen the 20 or more African heads
Right.
carved out of basalt and granite, which is some of the hardest stones in the world. And the so-called European scholars to this day won't admit that those are African heads, even though they had the braids behind. We found the braids behind. They got one with the helmets on that they were using in Kemet at that time. Now this is the kicker. Not only do they have the North-South Africa axis, did any of you know that the meter was used in Africa to construct the pyramids?
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Africans were the first ones to use the meter. Why? It's based on the rotation of the planet, the time it takes to get from one place to another. It's the distance. So we have the meters embedded in the construction of the temples, in the pyramids in Africa, and guess what? In the Americas too.
Yeah, this is powerful. We're going to have a part 2 and probably a part 3 and 4. That's what I'm thinking.
Right.
I think we have a few more parts to this. Brother Whiting, this was amazing. I really appreciate you taking the time out to come and present this information to us. I know for me, I've learned a great deal. I think it's important to sit at the feet of our elders. And brother, we really appreciate you and we honor you for the time and commitment. And like I said earlier, answering that call. We need it. So we're going to go ahead and close out. Again, we appreciate you. And Brother Whiting, we'll talk offline here to see when we can get you back so we can do a part 2 as well. Okay?
Okay, well, thank you very much. I feel blessed and honored for you to have me to talk to all of you. I know it's been a long morning, but oftentimes when the spirit hits me and I start talking,
It's all good.
it's just there, you know.
That's right. That's right.
I don't know what I'm going to say.
I felt that thing kick up in you. I felt it kick up. I was like, oh, this thing is taking off. So good. That's good. That's good.
My best day, and it's really been a joy and a pleasure to meet all of you. And I see my brother Matthew Davis here. My son was on for a while. I don't know what happened to him. I think he had to go someplace. And one of my nieces was on. She was at work, so she was tuning in from the post office. So
nice, very nice.
She won't get fired.
Right.
Okay, well, again, brother, thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. You've been a blessing.
Appreciate you guys interested in having the wherewithal to want to hear this information.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
All right. Have a great day.
Great day.
All right.
Love
Thank
y'all.
you.
All right, Brother Matthew, thanks for dropping by.
Okay.
All right. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.